Hi everybody, this is Joshua Pomeroy and I'm here with Lesson 2 in our Figma course. We're going to start with a brief review and then we're going to jump right into exploring more advanced fill options inside Figma. Let's get started. So here we are in our browser. The first thing we want to do is just go to figma.com. I can start typing it in and hit enter. And if you haven't created an account, make sure you do that. And then sign in with your Google ID or your email address, however you created the account the first time. So I'm going to open up our last lesson, or where we left off. Yours probably looks a little different depending on the color palette you chose from coolors.co. So we used coolors.co to generate interesting and harmonious color palettes for us, and we exported those as SVGs that we can pull right into Figma. And then we created a new frame and started exploring some of the basic shapes that are available to us right inside Figma. Now let's do the same thing that we did last time. Let's open a new tab and go to coolors, coolors.co. And this will take us to our palette generating website. Here it is right here. We're going to click up here where it says generate so that we can start with some kind of ideas of the colors that we want to use. And it's just a lot of fun to play with and start exploring different color palettes. So I'm going to go ahead and close down some of these windows to give myself a nice clean workspace. And then remember, we just hit spacebar a few times to start generating a new color palette. And once you like one, we'll export it as an SVG that we can pull right into Figma. I'm going to go with this one. So once you've decided, go right up here to export palette. We're going to export this, remember, as an SVG. And that will download it to our default downloads folder, whether you're on a PC or a Chromebook. It'll download it to whatever the default downloads folder is. So I'm going to tab back over to lesson 2, and let's pull in our new color palette, just like we did last time. All right, there's our new palette. And now remember, we can hold Control and use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out, and we can hold down the space bar to pan around our viewport. That will really help us navigate quickly through our document. Now we need to create a frame so we have a place to put some of our new artwork as we explore some of the more in-depth fill options inside Figma. So let's hit F on our keyboard. It's also this little waffle or very close to a hashtag icon right up here. We're going to pop open our social media presets and let's choose our Instagram post. Okay, and I like to just go to the X and Y right up here and set it to 0 and 0. And then let's pull our palette over just to tidy up our workspace. I'm going to hold down Shift and press the up arrow 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Holding Shift will nudge things 10 pixels at a time. So I now have a 50 pixel distance between my color palette and my frame. That just helps me keep everything really nice and tidy. So now we have our color palette generated from coolors.co. We have our square canvas ready to go. For this lesson, we need another pack of assets. And I've tried to make it really easy for you to find it. So you can just go to my website, joshuapomeroy.com, click on downloads. Quick URL to that is just joshuapomeroy.com/downloads. And for this one, we're on lesson 2. So we're going to get these assets and it's going to open up a Google Drive folder. Just select one, right click, say download, and that will download the files one at a time so you don't have to deal with unzipping the zip file. To make sure you have these, you're going to have an HD Canyon JPEG. You're going to have Funky Lines Pattern JPEG and a crumpled paper texture JPEG. Those are going to be the files that we're going to use to start adding some new kinds of fills to our objects. All right, this part's going to be really easy. Remember the rectangle tool? It's just R on the keyboard, so hit R, and we're going to draw out just a skinny rectangle. And I'm going to use those smart guides to help me match. I see that little red X and it snaps to the edge of my canvas. So I'm going to make it go all the way to the top and all the way to the bottom. And then I'm going to push my rectangle until it touches the left edge of my canvas. Now I want to make sure that my rectangle is kind of nice and skinny because we're going to stretch out 3 rectangles across the canvas to make sure that they're all equal sizes. And I want to show you the easiest way that I know how to do that. So first, we'll duplicate this rectangle by holding Alt and dragging. We're also going to hold Shift, and that's going to constrain our movement so that we can only move it left and right. Now let's line it up, and it will snap to the right edge of our other rectangle. Now, before you do anything else, just press Control D, and it will duplicate that action so we get another copy and moved out exactly the same amount of space, just like that. So now we have 3, even though they're all gray. Let's select them all. Over here in the inspector panel, we can see that they are 0 pixels apart from each other, so they're exactly touching. And now grab the right edge of this selection, and we're going to drag all 3 of these out until it snaps to the right edge of our canvas. And that'll give us 3 exactly equal width and equal height rectangles. Now the first rectangle, go ahead and select it just by clicking on the canvas. And we're going to explore the gradient fill. So back over here in the fill tab, let's click on that. We don't want to keep it this kind of medium gray color. Let's change the fill option from solid, so it's this drop down right up here, and let's choose linear. Now what we need to do is assign colors to the stops inside this gradient fill. So the first one, let's select the first one, and we can see it's also selected here. It's that top one. Now let's use the eyedrop tool, that little pipette icon, and let's just grab our first color from our palette. Let's select our second stop over here in our color picker panel. We'll select the eyedropper tool again, and let's choose the second color in our palette. And now we have a linear gradient. You see how it gradually changes. Let's double click off, and we can close down our color picker window. So now we have this nice gradual fade, this nice gradient change from these 2 colors. If you want to play around a little bit with this gradient, maybe change it up or change the angle, let's click on our rectangle again, go back over, click on our fill. That'll open up our color picker window again with our linear gradient in here. And on the canvas now, we can drag these circular nodes around to change the angle and depth of our gradient. And we get a lot of control to get these nice, smooth gradients. This is really, really a lot of fun to play with. So that's a linear gradient. I'm going to reset it back to going straight up and down. Let's go back over to our color picker window and change that fill option from linear to radial. So now it's using the lighter green or whatever color is in it that you have chosen in the center, and our second color out to the edge. And we can again adjust these. We can pull these nodes around. We can change the angle of that gradient. We can use those smart guides to help us snap it back into place. We also get a third little circular node here, and this will allow us to adjust the width of the radial gradient. So we can have this narrow beam of light, or we can drag it out further, and then we start to kind of just get a vignette effect. So there's a lot of different options and ways that you can tweak and customize the radial gradient. And I'll leave it like that. You can make it however you want. All right, for the next one, we're going to start using images to fill our shapes. The process is the same. We'll select our second vertical rectangle here. I'm going to go over to the Fill tab, click on this, and instead of solid, I'll drop this down, and you may have noticed we also have image down here at the bottom. So we can fill shapes with images, and that's why I had you download those folders. So it changes it to this just kind of grid pattern, and inside here we can hover over and get the tooltip that says Choose Image. Let's click on that so that we can navigate to our Downloads folder, and let's choose the crumpled paper texture. Select that, click Open, and that will fill our shape with this image. This image in particular, I've made sure it will tile seamlessly because I want to show you a really interesting way that you can use seamless textures or tiles in Figma. Under Fill, now we have more options on how the images fill the shapes. We can change this from Fill to Fit. We're going to skip over that for right now. We're going to skip over Crop for right now. Let's go all the way down to the bottom and choose Tile. Now we can see by default it's made it 50% scale and set our image to tile. That's fine. We'll leave it for there right now. But let me just show you. I'm going to hold Control and zoom out just a little bit. Then I'm going to hold Alt and drag a copy off of my frame so that I can pull this out and show you that this will just tile forever in a seamless tile. And this is a pretty high resolution tile here. So I'm going to click on my image again here, and we can change the percentage of scaling that's happening. I'm going to bump that back up to 100%. So we get a little bit more definition here in this crumpled paper texture. For now, I'll just leave this on the side on the pasteboard, but mainly I just wanted to show you how the tiling will just continue essentially looping this image no matter how large we make our shape. Isn't that great? That's really cool. So let me leave it right here so we can see that that's tiling. I also want to show you that you can stack fills. So on our second shape, let's select that again. Over in our fill panel, let's click the plus icon right up here. We can click this, and by default, it will add a new linear gradient fill. I want to change this to a solid color, and now it's made it all white. Let's choose one of the colors from our palette. I'm going to choose my third color here, and this gets into some real power with blending modes. So we also have blending modes inside of Figma. That's this little tear or raindrop icon. See, it says blend mode. So let's click that, and we're going to color our wrinkled texture paper. And let's just choose one of these different blending modes. Let's try overlay. So now it's given it sort of a blue overlay on top of our wrinkled paper pattern. Maybe just color, so that will just affect the color. If we wanted to darken it, let's try multiply. So play around with some of these settings. These are called blend modes or blending modes. There's overlay, there's soft light. You'll see that some of them have more effect than others. Here's difference. It actually inverts the color. And these different blending modes have a lot of different effects. I'm going to leave it on color for right now. And let's go ahead and let's change our tile scale to 100 like I did for my other one. So now we have actually two fills stacked on top of each other, and we can use the eyeballs over here to turn them on and off. So if I want just a grayscale wrinkled paper texture, I can turn off my blue color fill that is now set to color blend mode. If this is on normal, it's going to completely cover up my paper texture underneath. But you can see here I have this 100% value. I could put it on normal and then just say, let's give that 50% opacity on top of our wrinkled paper texture, or maybe even just 25. So you can change those amounts as well. I'm going to put it back to 100 and put it on the color blending mode. I liked how that looked. Okay, for our last section, we're going to use, this is actually the simplest image fill. We're going to click on our gray rectangle, go over here to the fill panel again, click on that swatch color. Instead of solid, let's drop it down to image, and let's go hunting for our final asset, choose image, and we're going to choose the HD Canyon picture right there and click open. And I'm just going to leave it on the fill option. And fill will do its very best to just fill the entire shape so that nothing's getting cropped out. And as you expand the shape or shrink the shape, it will reposition the photo inside of the shape right in the center. So I'm going to hold Alt and drag a copy to give you an example. So I've just dragged a copy outside of our frame for now. And just like we played with the looping or the seamless texture, I'll start expanding this and you can see what I mean. It will continue filling up this image as best it can with the entire photo. So it doesn't have to be vertical. As I squash it down, we can get it. Let's actually make it the same width as this one. So I'll just type in here 300 on the height. And we get a different orientation, but it makes it really easy to fill in these shapes. Just leave it on the fill option. Now, maybe to give ourselves a little bit more harmonious color palette, because this has added maybe colors that you didn't like from the color palette that you created using coolers earlier, let's play around with adding up more fills. So on our HD Canyon photo, let's add another fill just like we did before. Instead of gradient, let's open this up and change it to solid. And let's choose another color. Maybe we can choose the green and change it to hue. So play around with those blending modes. You can even stack up more fills. So maybe we wanted to have a gradient on top of the canyon, on top of the green overlay, and just say, you know what, I want it to fade out to white at the very top. So that's actually the default linear fill it will add when you add a new fill to stack up these fills. And I'm just going to say fade out right up there at the top to white. And maybe come down a little further. If I wanted to swap this around to fade it out to something darker, maybe let's use our darker blue here. We can choose that. And let's make sure that our second stop in our linear gradient is also that. And let's use our opacity slider right here to make sure that our gradient fades out to completely transparent. And now we're really utilizing our color palettes with these image fills. That gives us a lot of options, a lot of ways to customize how images and textures and colors and gradients fill in shapes. Maybe if you have time in your class, create another frame. I like using the Instagram post because it's just a nice square frame that gives me some stuff to play with. Maybe use some circles. And here's a pro tip. You can select any of these complex fills that you've created and added to your shapes. Say like this one with the canyon. We changed it green, then we added a dark blue teal gradient on top of it. We can use the keyboard command Control-Alt-C to copy its attributes temporarily to the clipboard. Now, on our ellipse that we created on our new frame, just press Control-V. And look at this. This is very interesting. I'll center this on the canvas with Alt-V and Alt-H and maybe expand it out a little bit more. Now we're getting a really interesting composition. Maybe I want to make the entire background this blue crumpled paper texture. So I can do the same thing. Let's select our second rectangle that we created and added up these fills to it. Control-Alt-C to temporarily copy the attributes and all the fills to the clipboard. And I'm going to add this to the background of my second frame. Control-V. That's interesting. That could maybe be an album cover or a t-shirt. At least the start of something. Oh, there was one more asset in that folder that I had you download. And let's go ahead and use that and change on the background that we just created. So over here, we can see on our image fill here, instead of this crumpled paper texture, let's just go ahead and go to choose image again. And let's choose the funky lines pattern and open that one. And for this one, these lines are very, very small. Let's bump it up in the scale of this pattern to, let's say, 150. And press enter. All right. Now I'm going to zoom into the selection and see what we have. Look at that. We've got all these different kinds of fills, different ways of filling shapes with gradients, with textures, with patterns. You can add and change blending modes. Explore more ways that you can use these fills and stack them up. There's just a lot of power. You don't have to have quite so many layers when you can have multiple fills on a single shape. So we created a harmonious little color palette once again using colors.co. We exported that as an SVG, brought it into a new Figma document, created a frame, created 3 rectangles of the exact same width that span across our frame, filled those with very different fill options, exploring the gradients, the pattern fills, and the image fills, and how you can stack these fills on top of each other and add gradients and change blending modes to affect how these things stack on top of each other and get very interesting results. And that's the end of lesson 2. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next lesson.